Jennifer. Thanks all for joining me this afternoon, this later Friday afternoon in Florida. It's my pleasure to be here. A lot of what the other presenters have resonated, what they've said has resonated with me today. So you're going to hear a little bit of the same themes mixed out from some of the others. So we will go ahead and get started. I want to give you a little bit of a context for the University of Central Florida. We are one of 12 public universities in the state. We're located about 10 miles east of downtown Orlando. We are a rather large university. We have almost 72,000 students and about 1,900 faculty. So it is a lot to keep up with. We do like to do some fun and interesting things, and we have plenty to draw from. The pretty pictures are of our new library renovation. It's just one of the first phases. So this is our phase 1A, and we're very eager to get students back on campus so they can see it. And it opened when they were gone for COVID. So it'll be really fun to have them on campus. So a little bit about our institutional repository. So it is named STARS. It is our showcase of text, archives, research, and scholarship. We do cast a very wide net. It is for works by, for, or about the University of Central Florida. We do have a lot of traditional scholarship. You know, we have a very robust thesis and dissertation program. We do encourage our faculty to submit their research and their scholarship. But most importantly, we welcome that non-traditional scholarship. The reason why we started STARS is because I had to say no to more faculty than I wanted to. We started for many, many reasons, but really for me, in my heart of hearts, it's because I wanted to say yes more than I said no. And as the library using a locally hosted instance of Content DM, we could not support all of the very exciting projects that our faculty were doing across campus, nor could we the library afford to put them on our server and pay those costs. So we really wanted to be able to support the great projects that our faculty were doing, and to be able to tell them that we had an institutional repository and that it was at no personal cost to them, and that they had local support for their projects, as well as our wonderful service reps at Digital Commons, is just really a huge win-win for us. And it has just grown exponentially since we started in 2015. So our staff, like most of you, we are a lean and mean staff. There are 3 of us with part-time responsibilities for the repository. So I averaged that out to about 1.5 FTE. You know, that's a fluctuating number. We do work very closely with our scholarly communication librarian, our subject librarians, our cataloging librarians, our librarian and the folks in special collections, university archives, and others. So it's definitely a distributed team, but the core group of us who day-to-day manage the operations is just the 1.5 staff. So that's us. So when I started thinking about submitting something to present on today, I started thinking back over the past year and the really exciting projects that our faculty had brought forward while everybody was remote, and what really meant the most to them and their students and their research. And it really came back to these projects from our history and anthropology faculty who wanted to make more of their resources, the resources they found, and some of the works that they were creating open. We have some other great projects by other faculty, especially our history faculty. But these 4 points I want to focus on today really are ones that came about just over the past year. And so that was really, that's the focus of today's presentation. So they're really looking for innovative and cost-effective approaches to share their work and expertise, and using STARS, our Digital Commons instance, the faculty have access to a platform that can support a variety of their projects. So we're going to look at the impetuses, creation, and outcomes, and a couple of tips of 4 faculty-led projects. So those are our open educational resources, which really we should probably say open resources, because they're not open OERs in the traditional sense. Open data, an open syllabi, and an open image database. I know somebody earlier spoke about how they really like talking to faculty, and having that conversation is a big part of what they do, and they really learn a lot. It's the same for us. Every single project that we work on starts with some sort of a story, or it starts with a conversation. So we don't enter into any of our projects without first having some sort of a conversation with the faculty, usually with others involved. Sometimes there's subject librarian, sometimes our scholarly communication librarian, because a lot of these do involve copyright or author right issues. In fact, the OER collection came to us from our textbook affordability librarian and a faculty member who had done a previous project. So the first thing we're going to talk about are those open resources. And this was actually inspired by an OER workshop at UCF, and the history department wanted to create a repository. So they were having a small group discussion in this workshop, and two of those history faculty members talked about the possibility of creating an OER repository of primary source materials for the history department. It would be something that would be accessible for all the department members and all of UCF, and hopefully beyond. So they really found out that they were all creating these lists of primary sources that they were using in their history classes, some of them teaching different sections of the same course, some of them teaching different courses that used the same resources, and they were all tracking them on their own and sharing them with their students in different ways. Some had documents, some had spreadsheets, and so they really wanted to pull those together. For their next round of workshops, they wanted to make this repository a reality, so they involved more faculty members from history, and we had a really good group of 5 to 10 faculty members who were able to pull together their resources. And the first thing we did was we created just a general collection, sort of an all collection for all of their OER history primary resources. And every single resource they had, they sent to me. We did start with this one and added some good document types to them so that they can be sorted by articles or books or law codes or whatever those document types are. So that is an evolving list, as document types tend to be. We do like to try to have those set really well in the beginning, but sometimes we know that those do fluctuate over time. And we didn't want to wait to start this to have them really figure out every single document type that they were going to need. So we got a good group of materials for their pilot project and started with those and made it so that they could sort based on that. Then the other thing we did was we customized the information that shows in the browse list. So every single one of these are a link out. You'll see that in the link here. So we are not concerning ourselves with any sort of copyright for these sources because they all do link out. But we did customize the information that we see here so that we have a basic description, the date, the location, keywords, and the course codes. This was the most important metadata for the faculty, for them to be able to easily glance at these, as well as the information they wanted their students to have up front. When we dig a little deeper into one of those sources, you'll see we do, again, have the course, the date, the location, the keywords, and the description, and that link out to the full text. So it's minimal metadata, but we did make sure that it was all very consistent and clean and had everything that the faculty wanted for their students. So then what we did was we had them in that big all bucket, and they wanted to sort them by the course codes. So we started creating some auto collects, and we made different series for each course code. We do have their full list of course codes, but we of course did not create all of them at once. So we started with only the ones that they had sources for in the repository, and then we've been building from there as they add more course codes to resources that come in. So my tip here for this one is to make use of your auto collects. So we do try to use existing fields, but sometimes a custom field is needed. So in this case, we have our course sort field. And so we did need to work with our rep to get that set up. So if you have any questions, if if you're new to AutoCollects, please do reach out to your rep about that. If you're an old hand at AutoCollects, you know that they are sometimes a lot to keep up with if you have a large number of them, but they are so very helpful for helping to organize your content. And in this case, they really do help us because we can go ahead and put in that course code and then just go ahead and pull all of the sources that have already been put in for that course code. So as new course codes are added, we do keep that up. And then of course, when more resources come in, if they are under an existing course code, then they automatically become part of that series, which is just really wonderful for our faculty to be able to grow their lists without having to each individually make their own list and try to keep up with them or one another. So the thing that came out of that one was after we had worked on that one for a little bit, it was up for a couple months. One of the faculty members said she had her own list that she had been working on. So she has these open educational resources for the ancient Near East, and she asked if we could create one just for her. So sometimes we have people who think that perhaps we're only doing this for large groups of people or for just only a specific department. And I do try to, allay people's concerns about that because we are here for all faculty, for all their projects, and we want to make sure that everybody knows that we are going to support them as much as we can. So she sent along her list in a very nice spreadsheet. Both of these collections we set up so that they could give us a spreadsheet and we could just batch upload everything. And they were able to work very well with that process. So that has been great. And we did give her a jump list as well, gave her some different categories, of course, that applied to her materials, and she updates that as needed. And so all of both of these collections took place, of course, 100% online, email, Zoom, and we've been able to work in that manner. So then what we need to think about for this type of collection, especially because they are just those links out, obviously there's no downloads involved. So that does look pretty sad, especially when they're looking at adding it to their annual accomplishments report or any information they want to put out there for promotion and tenure. So we make sure that we capture those metadata page hits so that they know, how many times the article information page has been accessed. And we do track over time their works posted. So this particular faculty member, she was putting together her annual report and she said, so what kind of statistics can I get? Because we do always start our conversation with, you can get great metrics from your content in stars because of digital commons. And so she said, okay, but you told me that they only link out, so I'm not getting the downloads. What can we do? So we give her metadata page hits and we show her, when things have been posted so she can track that information. She knows how many she's added this year. But we also use Google Analytics. So we can give her a little bit of a different view of the usage of her content. And we can also export this as a spreadsheet. And so between those two, she's able to tell a little bit more of a story about her content. So another project is out of our anthropology department, and it is open data. So this faculty member actually has a group of graduate assistants who are working out at Cape Canaveral, and they do multiple sites out there, and they've been collecting data over the past few years. So she came to us with all these different types of data and not really sure how she could make them available. And so we suggested that we come up with a few different collections for her. And the one that we have focused on this year is the Cape Canaveral Archaeological Mitigation Project. So we created a nice community, set some things up, and then we decided we really need to focus on just one of those. She has a lot of different collections in these, mainly because of the sites. So the way that made sense for them to organize their content was to have it by site. So the Burnham Cemetery is one site, the Burn site, the hotel site. So we do it by site, and then we also add it by the type of data they're collecting. So they have analysis data, mapping data, they have surveys, they're reporting and archiving. They don't have the same data for every site, but we did come up with a good list of the different types of data that they would need to add. And then for each one, of course, we have the drop down so that you can navigate within and get to the different types of data within there. A lot of their data are PDFs, but they do have some different mixed file types. So we wanted to make sure that they were able to have that native download as well. And we added those for them. So this is an example of a PDF. So that's great, easy for them to upload, easy for the viewer, easy for folks to download and use. But then they also have some images in there. They have some zip files. They have some GPS and GIS data. So for those items, we really had to think through how they wanted them to be used. So while I say that this is an open data collection, I do need to emphasize that for the mapping portion, once we got into it, and I mean, literally we had a lot of this online, and then realized that these GPS data points people could download and use. And so I very quickly got an email from them saying, could we please restrict them? So most everything is open except for the raw data of their mapping data, because that is a very tricky thing to put out there. So we did go ahead and restrict those, and it's restricted to their project group so that they can still have access to that, and then we can add people as needed to that. But those did need to be sort of held back a little bit. The tip I have for this one is to really listen to what your project partners need. So there's a lot that we do that we think makes sense to us. And I know earlier somebody said, we think we know what the faculty need, and then it isn't until you talk to the faculty or you hear, through somebody else that really they could use something else for their project, or to make their life easier, or to help get things in the repository. And so for this part of it, we have multiple ways for folks across campus to share files or metadata or anything with us if they're not uploading directly to the repository. So we use OneDrive, we use Teams, we use Google Drive, we use Dropbox. They can send it to us on a thumb drive. We really do try to meet them where they are. And so, at the beginning, we had suggested using Teams or Google Drive, but what made the most sense to them, because they were already using it and they already had their students working in it, was to use their instance of OneDrive. So this is actually one of their graduate assistants account in OneDrive, and that's where they've been organizing all of these files. So they were very easily able to give me access to it. And instead of me adding them onto something that we had, they just added me onto theirs, and then we were able to easily share the files back and forth. So this next one is really something that I would love to take credit for, but every now and then you get those faculty and their wonderful graduate assistants who just go for it and are able to create something that you would never think of. So I had a meeting with Dr. Scott French and his graduate assistant, and they said, we've got this Zora Neale Hurston Festival that the history department does every year, is a part of. It's a big thing in Orlando, and they really wanted to create, he was using it in his course, and he really wanted to create an open syllabi and make it more of an open course so that people who attended the conference could also have access to his materials and could follow along the course if they wanted to in their own time. So they said, can you do an open syllabi? And this is a question that we get a lot, not particularly about open syllabi, but about anything with regards to the institutional repository. Can you do images? Can we do an event? Can we do Data, can we do a database? Can we do an open syllabi? So a lot of times what I'll say, if it's something that I've never done or I've never seen done, I'll say I will ask. So I ask a lot. And I know sometimes our digital commons reps always wonder what they're going to get next from us, because we really do like to see how creative our faculty can get. And we encourage them to use the repository so that it works for them. So this is the Zora Festival. Their conference cycle right now is Afrofuturism. And what they did is they created a community for the entire conference, because they intend to load conference materials in as well, but wanted to start, of course, with that open syllabus. So right on their community page, they have bolded, you can find the syllabus here, and then people can link directly over to the syllabus from the main conference page in STARS. So the nice thing about this, they have a lot of introductory text. They did all their own banners. I really just set them up and they were off and running. The first couple times, you know, I did a little bit of the inputting, some of the text for them and everything, but they really wanted to do it on their own so that they didn't need to wait for me to get to it. So I gave them a little bit of training, showed them the digital commons documentation, and they took off, which was fantastic, because they were able to create something that I had no idea we would be able to create. So they put a lot, this again is still in their introductory text. I should mention, I did drop all the links for these collections into the chat. So if you want to check any of them out on your own, I'm really just pulling some snippets and slices so that it's easier to view. But please do feel free to go through some of these on your own if you're curious about it. So this does say the syllabus schedule, and the course is an open course for conversations and explorations leading up to the conference and beyond. They did live stream their conference, and they released new materials each week. So it started off just with week 1, and then they would open them up every single week. And then they linked to the content, as well as having the content available within the general collections list. So they did this to make it easier for their users to navigate, which I thought was really smart on their part. They sort of built this more from a user perspective and what they knew that their folks needed, and were able to, you know, add in the when it was released so that people could easily follow along. So then this is an example of just one of the weeks. They put different banners or images up at the top so that it would be, you know, a little more interesting based on the content for that week. Each week had a name. This one was an exhibit week. So they were able to upload new materials, of course, into the repository and use those materials. But a lot of times they would link out to materials that were available elsewhere, or they would link to materials that were already in the repository. We have a couple of podcasts and some other items that go along with these themes. And so they were able to repurpose a lot of that content and use it as well. So this is just a little bit further down that page. They added additional headers. They would highlight things and link, of course, over to them. And this is where they were able to upload another resource and then go ahead and make that available. And so this was the exhibition catalog. So whatever made sense for that week, and they really made it their own. They also were able to do a lot of keywords, were great with adding descriptions and abstracts so that those taking the course would have a really good feel for what the content was, and, you know, be able to really dig into it. So they did want to make this very useful for the students and make sure that everybody understood what was involved. So this one in particular is that exhibit catalog. So users, of course, could view it on the screen, or they could download it like this, and they were able to get a lot of content for the course shared that way. So here is the big tip for this one. Because they were so they were so proactive in what they wanted to do, and they really did want to do a lot of it on their own. And they have the skills. I mean, they do a lot with other databases and with their own websites and everything. So they're very technically savvy and can really do a lot of this work without needing for me to intervene. Is that to add them as administrators, of course, to the community. But what that does is it created a little bit of a problem, because as community admins, you have to be an admin for the entire repository in order to have it show on the My Account page, or as that gray admin bar at the top of the screen. So we added them, and then they couldn't get to it. And they were like, why can't you get to it? So we had this little round and round. We did have to have a Zoom call so I could see that they really could not get to it. And so we dug into it a little bit more, and I contacted Digital Commons. And the workaround for that was that they can access it, the configuration page for a community, if they enter the URL directly. So they will not be able to see it on their My Account page. They will not be able to get that little gray bar at the top. But if you give them the direct URL to that page, and maybe I'm the only one who didn't know about this, they can then get to that community page. They can edit it, and more importantly, if they're adding new weeks, or if they're adding new series, or whatever whatever's adding for that time, if they're opening something up, they can run the update so then it shows on the community page, which is really where it was. They wanted to be able to edit their introductory text, which I completely understand, and they wanted to be able to update that page so that as new weeks occurred, they would then show on the main community page. So make sure, if you have folks that you've added as admins on their community, that you share that URL with them so that they can get to that page and make their own changes and do their own updates if they so choose. We do have some faculty who just hand us their stuff, like the one I mentioned before, where they just filled out the spreadsheets and sent them to us, or where like I get the files from OneDrive and I do the upload. They do give us the metadata in a spreadsheet, but so we do sort of work with faculty where they are. If they want to be fully involved, and if they want to take real complete ownership of their project, that's great. If they need a little more help, if they just need us to answer questions every now and then, that's great. If they need us to do more of the heavy lifting for them, as long as they provide the content to us, we are happy to do that as well. So we really do try to meet them where they are, no matter what the project is. So for the open image database, this is one where we have a faculty member who does a lot of work with Bolivia. So a lot of his work has been in Bolivia and with colleagues in Bolivia, and with small organizations there that don't really have a lot of resources to do a lot of things online and to keep websites going. So he really does like to be able to make sure that he has a lot of his content available to them. So we started with some of his research and documents that he wanted to share with them. Of course, the repository made that very easy. And then last summer, he came to me and said that he was on sabbatical and it was COVID. So he was going through different projects that he had. And he said he'd been digging through old things on a computer, and he came across a database generated website of pictures of ceramics that he had made for one of his Bolivian projects back in 2004. So this was a 16-year-old project, old image database from an old website. And of course, he said it looked pretty clunky by today's standards, but based on it being of historical interest, as well as his anthropological interest, he really wanted to see if we could go ahead and put it in STARS, so that we had an artifact of those materials. So it was cut up into a lot of different files, and he's like, what do you say? Do you want to try it out? So of course I said, yeah, let's try it. Let's see what happens. So I sent him some ideas for what we could do and said, but really not seeing your content, I'm not sure where you want to go with this. So he went ahead and sent me the zip file of the HTML, and it looked a little something like this. So it had folder for his images, for the previews, and all of these HTML index pages. And of course, this is kind of what the index page looked like. Once I put it together a little bit more in the same directory, we were able to populate these with images, but it had this basic navigation at the top so that it, you could just jump from page to page, and then some basic information about each image. The images, there were 365 images. And so the only way to see what those images, referred to, of course, was this page, those index pages. So it was a lot of back and forth with the index pages and the images. But I said, okay, we could go ahead and try to set this up. We could do a couple different things. We could take a video of how it would be used, because he really wanted to have an artifact of what the website looked like. But what we came up with was creating a community for the entire project, and then two different collections. One was a series for the directories, and the other is a reconstructions image database. So all of the image files, those 365 images, were dropped into this reconstructions image gallery. We uploaded them in the order that they appeared on the website. So we just tried to keep them as consistent as we could with his original directory information. We took what minimal metadata he had from those index pages and used what was available. So our goal here was to make the images available. He has plans to enhance the metadata as time permits, but he just didn't want to lose it. He, saw that he couldn't make it available anymore. The software that it had originally been created on was no longer in use, and he really just wanted to make sure that he had access to them. So we just went ahead and went with that minimal metadata and put those online. So what we did for the directories, once we had all those 365 images in there and ready to go, is we created a PDF from the original HTML pages and dropped it in the document section of his directories. And we did upload a zip of all of the original website files. So he wanted to be able to share it, people to use it, and make sure it was available. So we dropped those right in there for him. The PDF looks a little something like this. We really tried to recreate the navigation of the website as a PDF, and made it so that you could click on the numbers to navigate between the pages and to corresponding images. So for example, if we click on the 361 to 365, that takes us to the very last page. So if people want to do this within the viewer, they can navigate. If they want to download it and use the PDF that way, they can navigate as well. And then within that, each of the images within the PDF are linked to the corresponding image in the image gallery. So if we click on the last one, that will take us over to the image within the image gallery. And this was really the best way that we could think of to sort of reconstruct the reconstructions as much as possible, to make it be as close to what he originally had back in 2004. So that has really met the need that he had to make this available and make sure that he did not lose the content. So for final thoughts, everybody's happy. We like to see people happy and excited about using the content and the collections. I will say, I know people have talked a lot today about promoting collections and promoting the repository to faculty, and how do we get faculty to use it and convince them to upload their stuff. And it is a huge commitment for time and different obstacles that come along. But what we have found is that if we focus on the faculty's needs, that's really where we get the biggest bang for our buck. And if we allow them to include those non-traditional items and allow them to have as much influence and input into their projects as possible, that's really what has made the difference for us. So that's my parting advice for that. And we really have a lot of fun with these projects. And we get a lot of word of mouth. So like someone said earlier, it starts with one little project and it goes to another and another and another. And that's how a lot of these have gone. It's grown from one small thing to the next project, to the next project, to the next project. And right now it's not slowing down. So thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can always email me directly at lee.dotson@ucf.edu, or we do have a general account for our repository, and that's stars@ucf.edu. Anybody have any questions, comments?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A or in the chat, but great presentation. I have, when we started with Digital Commons here, I actually spent a lot of time, because your Digital Commons presence is so robust at UCF. I spent a lot of time looking through your collections and your stuff to kind of see how it all worked, because you have such a large collection of material in there, and you have used the repository in such unique ways. So it's very impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, you asked in the beginning how long I've worked at UCF. I've been there on and off in different capacities since 1995. I've worked with digital collections at UCF since 95 and advocated for many years for a repository. So was thrilled in 2015 when we were able to bring one online.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, okay.